Hello, my name is Megs Reynolds, and I'm the Executive Director for the Do More Agriculture Foundation. We are the national voice and champion for mental health in Canadian agriculture. Thank you for joining another edition of Talk It Out. This month, our topic is on grief and loss, and joining me today is Jeremy Vaandrager. Jeremy, thank you so much for participating, for supporting mental health and ag, for being an ambassador for Do More, and for being here today. I will pass things over and let you further introduce yourself.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for having me today, Megs. I am a chicken farmer from Abbotsford, BC, a beautiful Fraser Valley. We have about 10,000 laying hens on our farm, and I'm also a feed rep, so sales and service for poultry farmers in our area. So I get to see a lot of our poultry farmers here in BC.
Which really kind of lends itself to our conversation today, where we're looking at grief and loss more from that supporter role, and not necessarily from yourself going through it. Although I know we don't go through life without having our own experience with grief and loss, but definitely looking to focus more on kind of that supporter role.
Right, right. So it's been a difficult 2 years for poultry farmers in our area, going from, the heat dome, where there was a lot of animals lost, to the flooding in Sumas Prairie, where animals, dairy farms, poultry farms, lots of loss of birds, lots of animals. And then lately it's been avian influenza. About a year ago, avian influenza took out probably 40% of the poultry farms in our area. So it's been a very difficult, challenging time as well. In the last couple of years, there's also been loss of human life, whether that be through accident or, a father, passing away earlier than what was expected, or a little earlier than they should have. So yeah, definitely have experience with dealing with grief and loss in our industry here. So.
And I think it's really important to note, just in all the things that you just touched on, that I think it's easy just to think of having grief and loss and experiencing those emotions and processes as being connected to losing someone that we care about. But I think it's really important to realize that there are different things that can go on in life that can create grief and loss for individuals. And I think especially with farming, the way that farmers are attached to and care for their animals or their crops and their land, that all of the things that you mentioned, that those can trigger those feelings of grief and loss as well.
Absolutely. I think all farmers are animal lovers, those that have animals. You think of a broiler farmer, they grow a chicken for meat. And sometimes that's, 30 days, or, 1 month or 40 days or whatever it may be. And the end process is that bird is going to die, but you want to take good care of that animal as long as it's under your roof. And for it to die, whether it be heat or flooding or even influenza, it's a huge loss. You see this thing that you've worked so hard for, and these lives that you've looked after just go away. It's very difficult. It's very painful for a lot of farmers.
And in agriculture, we do have more stigma surrounding mental health. Do you think that there is a bit of stigma around allowing ourselves the grace to go through that grief and loss when it is something that is uh, maybe an event out of our control that happens on farm, either to our animals or to our crops?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, farmers were just made to work. And when there's a problem, we just want to work and work harder, and we'll fix it that way. We don't want to sit and think about, our emotions, our mental health. And I think it's definitely something that's been changing in the last few years, but we've got a long ways to go. And that's why I think, Do More is doing a great job of it. And we need to continue to break that stigma and help farmers not be, not be so embarrassed to reach out or to, say that they need help, right?
Even
So.
just to be able to recognize it in ourselves. A story that I tell all the time is losing 90% of our crop when you're at harvest time to in a hailstorm. And I didn't, I felt like a failure, that loss of, income for the year and supporting my family and, the crop that I'd put time and effort into. But I didn't allow myself to even, I don't even think I considered the fact that what I was experiencing and feeling was grief and loss. And I just pushed everything down because, you know, you're not supposed to feel those things. And even now, sometimes, like when I am sharing my story, and I've done it a lot, I feel silly sometimes saying that that was, you know, a loss for me, and I experienced grief through that, because it's almost like we're not supposed to, right? We're supposed to be okay. We're stoic. We're supposed to be able to take the hits and get up again. And there's always next year and just keep moving forward.
Yeah, for sure. That line of there's always next year, there's always next year. I spoke with one farmer who he was hit with all of them. You know, he lost half his flock during the heat dome, and then his barn was flooded, and then he got avian influenza. And every time I see him, he just says, "Well, there's always next year. There's always next year." And yeah, we've had some good cries in the barn as well. It's so tough that at some point you got to let it out. You gotta grieve. You have to mourn that loss for sure.
Mhm.
So
How have you found, what has worked best for you in supporting farmers? I mean, you are unique in the sense of what you do with the feed side. You have, you know, a wider network and a lot of, you know, relationship and trust with the farmers that you deal with personally. So, just for anyone listening, what advice you have for kind of how to be supportive and maybe sometimes leading a little bit in encouraging that person to have that conversation or that cry or reach out for help.
exactly. So really, I like to think of it in a few different ways. The first is, the person's physical health. Um, it's okay to ask, did you sleep last night? How much are you sleeping? There's no shame in going and getting some sleeping pills and getting your body that rest that it needs. Or, when you're in the thick of having a big issue on the farm, something's going on. Did you eat today? How about drinking water? Have you had any water? And it's not forcing the person to do anything, but it's putting that thought in their mind that, oh yeah, I didn't drink any water today. I haven't looked after myself. So the physical side of it is so important that, very basics, food, water, and sleep. The second is more the practical side of things. Whether it be, a loss on the farm with the flooding, well, give the person, instead of just asking, how can I help, or reach out if you need me, say, I've got some friends, we're going to come down on Saturday and we're going to wash your barn for you. And then the farmer can say, oh, actually, I don't really need it washed, but if you've got the manpower, we can sure use help on this. If you give a specific thing that you want to do to help, I definitely find that that is way more better received than to just say, call me if you need something. So be very specific in that. And maybe you're not one to do those kinds of jobs. During avian influenza, any of the compensation that the government was giving, they needed paperwork, and they needed a ton of paperwork. And it was incredibly daunting for so many farmers. So asking a couple of farmers to get together and, hey, why don't you guys work on this together? Or how can I put a package together for you to make it a little easier on you? Instead of spending weeks and weeks and weeks putting documents together, help out with that. Maybe that's what your strength is. So that's kind of the practical side of things. And then on the mental health side of it, it's seeding things. It's just saying, have you talked to a counselor? Or, we've got our QR codes, just leaving those on a farm and just saying, hey, if you need to, scan the QR code, and the best agricultural mental health will come up on your phone right then and there. And there's no shame in that. I don't need to know about it. I'm not a mental health advisor. I can't do this, but here you go. This is an out for you that you can check in that way. So, and when you're trying to talk to people, the biggest thing that I find is listen more and talk less. So often I've sat with guys and you get those 30 seconds, 1 minute of silence, and then they'll say something. So don't feel like you need to lead the conversation or try and fix anything. Just be there and just listen more than anything. There's also times where if something really big is going on, I will phone the person and I'll say, I'm going to bug you every day between 3 and 6 o'clock at night. I'm going to either call you or text you, and if you're really annoyed with it, tell me, but otherwise I'm checking in with you every day. And usually after third, fourth, fifth day, they're like, you know what? I really appreciate this. It's good to just debrief at the end of the day. What happened today? What did I deal with? What government agency did I have to deal with? What got cleaned on the farm? Or, what steps ahead did we make in our grieving process or in our, resolution process into whatever's happened. So that's definitely been helpful. I also think we need to look out for what I call people on the peripheral. So not just the farmer, but who are the people that are supporting that farmer very directly. We need to check in with them as well and ask them the same questions. Are you eating, sleeping, drinking? Have you reached out for some help? Have you, you were very involved in this accident that happened on a farm that took someone's life. How are you doing with this? Are you getting the help that you need? So it's more than just one person that you need to look after. So that's definitely been some advice, some comments that I could make on it. So yeah.
Yeah, there's so much of value in all of that. And, I think a really important piece that, with how you check in and what you ask is that when that thing is going on, you're often in fight mode, right? This has to happen, this has to happen, this has to happen. And so it isn't always the time to pull your feelings out and process them. But that's such great advice to say, like, are you sleeping? Have you slept? How much did you sleep? Are you eating? Because those are the things that do still need to happen while you're moving through the other things that have to happen. But even asking those questions creates a moment of self-reflection of maybe I haven't, and that's that person checking in on themselves. So there
Yeah.
is that mental health aspect, even without making it a mental health aspect or focus, which I really, really love.
Yeah. It's so much of just seeding things in their minds, just asking questions. You don't have to answer anything. You don't have to fix anything, but just ask, you know. I found that so helpful for, in one situation where it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon and the farmer was saying, he's had a bit of a headache. He wasn't feeling great. I said, well, did you eat lunch today? Well, no, I ate breakfast at 5 o'clock and that was it. So you go in the house and eat your lunch. We'll fix things here. We'll deal with whatever has to be happening on the farm. Um, it's so necessary, those very basics when you're dealing with this. And um, usually when something bad happens on a farm, when there's a loss, the neighbors, the friends, they'll come, they'll bring meals, they'll bring food, but they don't know what else to do. So as farmers, as peers, we're the ones that are going to get in the barn and help make the thing run.
Mhm.
Even if it's, you take a list and you say these 4 guys that you trust, we're going to look after your chores for the next month. And we've got a calendar together. Here we go. This is what we're doing. So we're not dealing directly with, the mental health of it, but we are helping him, heal himself and work himself when he doesn't have to do all the day-to-day chores. So
And often through that, that example, or saying, hey, let's get, a group together. We're going to work on this together, whether that's paperwork or cleaning up after something. You're bringing people together so you're not isolated, you have connection, and you're going to naturally have conversations and communication with that, which is going to be helpful as well.
yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah.
And I do love you highlighting the importance of looking after and checking in on people on the periphery, because they are so often forgotten about, and oftentimes they're also working very hard to be that support person, and possibly in the process not taking care of themselves and refilling their own cup first.
Yeah. And then it has to get pointed back to yourself as well, because if you are at all involved in it, make sure you take the time yourself to, take a day off and just, spend time with your family or do whatever you need to do to recharge your batteries. So
One of the questions that we had to talk about today, and I liked it and I tweaked it a little bit, because it was how do you show up if you feel like you're interfering? And I think it's more, especially when we start doing this and we're not used to doing this, the understanding that we are going to feel like we're interfering and showing up anyways, and showing up maybe even if we are, possibly being a little annoying, like your comment of, I'm going to check in on you every day for the next week between this time, because it's needed. And
Yeah,
oftentimes that person is not going to ask for it because they're not comfortable asking for it.
absolutely. And there's times when they're not going to answer me and they don't answer my phone calls, so I send a text. This is your daily check-in. Call me. Let's talk. Let's do whatever. And if I don't hear from them, that's fine too. They're just
Mhm.
not in that space to talk, then I make sure that the next day we have that conversation. So that's definitely been something that I found useful. It's not easy all the time, to have those conversations and then to have the debrief of what happened that day, when you're trying to deal with a loss, when there was an accident on the farm, and how do you communicate what happened that day. And it's things I didn't really want to know,
Mhm.
but it definitely helps the other person and it helps them get it out and explain what happened. And like I say, it's a debrief. So
What do you do for you? Because that's one of the things that I've noticed. I was at a farm show in Ontario this week and had a conversation with someone and just said that I oftentimes people are sharing their stories of loss with me. And I will go home from a farm show sometimes or go to my hotel room and I'll just cry. And it's not necessarily that I'm sad for myself personally or something that just happened in my life, but it's I need a way to release the emotion that I have been holding all day from all of the stories and the empathy that comes from listening and supporting people where when they're sharing things that are sometimes hard to hear.
oh, that's a tough one. I need to do a better job of that. Yeah, like I've told you before, I have my old farm truck, and the best thing for me is jumping in my truck and going for a drive. And I did a lot of that this weekend. It's cropping time here. There's lots of dairy farmers cutting their corn silage. And to me, that was just a joy to drive around and say, who's got it done and who doesn't, and look at how big that crop is or what that is. And to see some of the goodness in farming that is in our area still, that's been something that recharges me, that helps me. As far as mourning, that's been a hard one. I might have shared it with you at one point that, through all of this, the heat dome, the flooding, everything that's gone on, I just worked. And then about a year and a half ago, our dog died. And it was our dog that we'd had for 12 years. And I didn't really like the dog. Well, I cried like a baby for about a week. And it took me a long time to realize that that was finally the step that was, I'm allowed to cry. I'm allowed to mourn. This is something that, life was mostly normal at the time. And it's okay to get that off my chest and to cry, to release that. So I get your point of crying, and I wish I could cry more often in the evenings and just get that release. But yeah, I'm still working on that. So
Well, and we've talked too about prayer and meditation and how that can be really helpful for individuals as a way to kind of do that self-care. And I
yeah,
think too as a way to see the good. Like I try to be just really present in my day to day and find that that kind of recharges me as I kind of catch those moments like you're talking about the silage. Like I would have my window down and just the smell of it, right?
yeah, yeah. Following the tractors, cruising down the road, and just seeing this great big crop, and it's like, you know what? There's a lot of goodness there. There's a goodness in agriculture, goodness in what's going on, and
Mm.
yeah, we're making lots of food to feed animals, and those are just things that just recharge me and make me feel good. So yeah.
Have you found just a difference in how people can react to what they're going through and to loss and grief?
Yeah, it's different personalities deal with it differently. Someone who is much more emotional they'll come out and talk to me a lot more than people who just want to work, and they just want to work and get their head down and work. Um, and I find that the people that want to work, a lot of times you get them one on one, and that's when they have a breakdown with you. And my day was going to be a quick 1 hour visit for this person, and that turned into the entire morning, just to sit and talk and to go through everything. And it had nothing to do with chicken feed, which is the reason I was there. But I was there. It was just us, and the person could, talk about how difficult, lose their house in the flood, lose the flock, lose everything. Um, so yeah, it depends on their personality and what they need, and you have to read that going in as well. Don't push if they don't want to get pushed into, like, here's all this mental health stuff here. You can get counseling for nothing here in BC right now, and think things are good. If they don't want to hear it, they don't want to hear it, and you just keep saying it isn't going to help.
Mhm.
So that's why a lot of it is just planting that seed, and like I say, just leaving notes there on where they can get help. And
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah,
so
I think that's important because it can, especially when we have that emotional connection, and maybe it's someone, in our family or someone that we care about deeply, and there is that tendency to push because we're worried, right? It's coming from that place of love. But sometimes that can make it harder for that person to connect and to reach out and to be open to it.
and that's where I'm saying listen more and talk less.
Mhm.
You'll be way more effective if you just listen.
Mhm.
And when you're listening, you'll find out if they want to talk or not. So
How and this is kind of, I guess, a follow-up, but um as that would be the same way then how you encourage people to reach out to support. It's more through that seeding and working with them on their pace than trying to kind of hammer it home or make that connection for them.
yeah, for sure. I mean, it depends how well you know the person. There's somebody that I'm working with now that I made the deal with him that he had to go see counseling by the end of the month.
Mhm.
And he gave me a bet that, if he doesn't, he's going to give me something. And like, it was very clear that he needed it, and he said he would go. So we just follow up on that, and we just keep bugging each other that way. But yeah, it's a lot of seeding, and just I think back to when we've been through this. That's where like BC, we can get the free counseling through AgSafe, right? And hearing from farmers, well, no, we're not going to go. No, we're not going to go. Oh no, we're not going to do this. But then hearing from AgSafe how much money they have paid counselors in the past year from farmers that have actually gone, it's proof that we don't want to talk about it, but we do want it, right? So again, you just can't push. It's a lot of just seeding it and saying, it's there. So
And sometimes we need to say, well, I don't need that, right? And it
yeah,
doesn't mean that we actually believe that or think that. We just need to say that.
exactly. So yeah.
How would you, for anyone out there listening, encourage them to maybe make some steps in their life for just maybe even being aware of how the people around them are doing, and then kind of maybe baby stepping into some of the things you've talked about with playing that support role?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that you ask is, how are you doing? And I really want to know.
Mm.
It's not just the how you doing. Yeah, good. Say, yeah, okay, how's the weather? Blue sky, yeah, whatever. It's how are you doing? I really want to know. Like, be sincere in that. And sometimes you'll get a proper answer and you can keep the conversation going. Other times they don't want to talk to you, then you don't push it.
Mhm.
Um, and from there, you just kind of, yeah, do a lot of listening and know that you are not the mental health professional. And if something comes up that you need the professionals, then direct someone in that way. But don't feel like you need to solve everything or fix anything, or that you need to be the answer for their problems.
Mm.
So that's kind of
Yeah, that's important. You're not there to solve or to fix anything. And you can be there to support. And it's often, I think we often confuse sympathy and empathy,
yeah.
whereas sympathy is more that, well, at least, or, someone has it worse and you're trying to fix or make that person feel better. And empathy is just, I'm here to talk. I'm so sorry you're going through that. Um, there was a really incredible thread on Twitter about someone showing up on farm that worked in the industry, not a farmer, and could tell the farmer was struggling. And, she was able to say, hey, I've noticed this. Like, how are you really doing? Um, and the farmer said, I'm not doing okay. I'm not well. And so she said, can we call a crisis line together? Which I think is so amazing because oftentimes that can be a barrier of even starting the conversation or checking in on somebody, because if we check in on them and they want to talk, what do we do with that, right? I'm not a therapist. I don't think I'm equipped to have this conversation, but just knowing that the resources are out there. A lot of provinces have, agricultural based support lines, and some have free counseling like BC and some other provinces, and just knowing that you can help by connecting someone to that, and there's a chance that they might have not made that connection on their own.
Yeah, Exactly. It's if you're going to have the conversations, it's good to know where the next step would be. How could somebody get, a hold of a crisis line or anything else? But those are pretty easy to find, right? So,
Yeah. And for anyone looking to find a list of all of those things, you can head over to domore.ag, our website. We have a full resource page. You can also connect to Ag Talk through our website at domore.ag/Ag Talk. And Ag Talk is a national peer-to-peer support platform that is free for anyone 16 years and older, fully anonymous, and monitored by mental health clinicians to help have that conversation and keep everyone safe.
yep.
Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us today, for everything that you are doing. You are a true champion and leader in the mental health space in our industry, and we're so lucky to have you.
Thank you, Megs. Always a pleasure to talk mental health with you.
For everyone who has been watching, thank you so much for staying tuned for another episode of Talk It Out. Please visit domore.ag for more resources, for more information, or if you're looking to support mental health in the Canadian ag industry.